It is time for the weekly rant where Will and I will talk about the latest news, price action, and whatever the hell else we want to talk about. Let's get into it, Will. How are you?
Good, Simon. One big piece of news this week is that PayPal has launched its own stablecoin. That has a bunch of people really excited. This is the first time that a really big institution that has been dealing with money for a long time has actually decided to join us on the dark side and launch their own token. So there's a whole bunch of different opinions there. Some people are excited, some people are apprehensive. Uh, how do you see it, Simon?
I think this is good news, isn't it? If it's allowing more people into the space, another stablecoin, which probably is fairly secure, I guess, in the grand scheme of things,
Mm,
because it is a
mm.
collateralized stablecoin, which is important to have, as we know from previous crashes. So I think it is, in general, a positive move. It's allowed, I guess, the crypto world to start talking about stablecoins again. And I know that there's a lot of pushback against this coin
Mm.
because everyone's going, hang on, PayPal can just freeze your account. PayPal can seize your stablecoin if they choose to. And everyone got really quite upset about that and was like, hang on, didn't you know that USDC and USDT can do that anyway? And so I think, crypto Twitter has a short memory. And so it allows us to have that conversation again that, hang on, the biggest stable coins in the market already can do that. So PayPal's not doing anything different, but allowing more users into the space is what we need.
I think what surprised them was that I think it's easy to look at a Web2 incumbent coming in offering something as big as stablecoin. It's really easy to get suspicious. And so a couple of people probably went in and looked at the ERC20 smart contract. That's really easy to do. It's really short. And you don't even have to understand the code. You can just look at the functions and see what they do. And one of those functions said freeze account. And of course, anybody looking at that would get upset. What is this? This ERC20 has the normal Ethereum functions and then has this thing called freeze. So obviously that caught fire on Twitter. But you're right, Simon. This is pretty much common for every, I suppose, centralized USDC token that we have. Maybe one thing that's a little bit scary is that PayPal does have a reputation of maybe being a little bit over eager to freeze. If I'm not mistaken, USDC might have frozen tokens when it's a hacker is reported, and we know where the USDC went. So, that freeze happens. But then, if you've ever used PayPal, I've used it, and a couple of times I have had my account frozen, and sometimes it's actually taken me months to get it unfrozen, calling tech support and trying to convince them that no, I'm not a hacker. Yes, it's my account. I just moved countries or changed phone numbers or something like that. And it's really hard to convince them. And it becomes super frustrating because of their level of security. And sometimes a freeze is $20, but it's crazy they would get that pedantic over such a small amount. So I would worry if I had $50,000 in PayUSD and then they decide to freeze it, I'd be worried. So I guess that's something that they have to fix on their end. They've got to provide the trust that we need because it is a trusted token.
Absolutely,
Wow.
it is. And I would say that PayPal is, I guess, known for being difficult for the business owner. So the person on the business
Mhm.
side of PayPal, I've heard many stories of friction, freezed accounts,
Mhm.
stopped payments, those kind of things. But the retail side, the people who don't have the business, everyone uses PayPal. Everyone has a fairly
Mhm.
seamless experience with it. So that's what I'm focusing on. I know PayPal, yes, has some challenges as far as on the business side, but the retail side love it and use it all the time, and it's very seamless. And so that
Mm.
experience is what we want. They're bringing people who have a good experience with PayPal into the space. So I think it's overall a really good thing for the space. No investment here. There's no
Yeah.
ability to make any money out of this. PayPal are the ones that are going to make money out of this. So allowing more on ramps, easier access to crypto, gets people asking more and more questions about the space.
Mhm.
It's bullish.
I think it's amazingly bullish, and it's good to see more sort of credibility lent to crypto. Rewind back 5 years, and PayPal or anybody else would never have touched it. They probably have even criticized it. Now here we are, we're watching them introduce their own stable, and who knows what else will come in the future. And the more on ramps we get into crypto, the better. One thing that has me concerned actually is, I suppose, what the conspiracy theories call Operation Choke Point. I don't know if it's a conspiracy or not, but it does feel like some of the on ramps are getting affected. The banks are, I suppose, putting limits on how much crypto you can buy depending on the country you are in. So it's kind of nice to have other on ramps out there. I'm glad that if I ever get stopped by my bank, I could always go to PayPal, buy PYUSD, and then use that to buy Bitcoin if I so wish to.
Absolutely. So we're just seeing the traditional markets moving into the space who want to make money. That's basically what we're going to see. PayPal, big incumbent, moving into the space. Wouldn't be surprised if PayPal soon, in not to the distant future, are launching some element of an exchange within the system. So
Mm.
it's a space where people want to make money, and PayPal, big incumbent, moving to the space will gobble up a lot of the revenue from other people in the space. And I guess speaking
Mm.
of big players, which has always been a thesis of mine, is that the biggest players in the space are going to constantly gobble up the smaller players. Coinbase's layer two base, Uniswap is now moved into base. So the biggest AMM in the crypto space is now moving on to Coinbase's layer two. Again, a bigger player moving in, going to gobble up
Mm.
all that revenue on that layer two. What are your thoughts on that one?
How surprising is that? Base isn't that old. It was just launched a couple of months ago. It's crazy that Uniswap just came out this week and announced that they are on Base and trading. I'm not sure what exactly you can trade on Base yet, but at least it's really cool to see that the infrastructure is there. That means that if Uniswap is there and if they're building in secret, makes me wonder who else has been building there. Coinbase obviously has a lot of influence in the space. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a whole bunch of other projects building there. Base is just another layer to nothing super special. I think what Coinbase might be able to put into Base is some sort of network effect. And if they do that, it'll end up being the thriving layer two that everybody goes to. This means that Optimism and ZkSync had better really up their game because they're going after a really strong opponent who has been there for a long time. It's nice to see competition. I hope it doesn't get too centralized though.
I don't know if it can, isn't it? It's built on optimism. So I'm
Mm,
not sure how it works, but I guess what Coinbase will be allowing is their hundreds of millions of users an easier access to a decentralized version of it. So
mm.
obviously
Yeah.
Uniswap want to
I
be part of
mean,
that. Uniswap want to capture the market that's coming in from Coinbase. So everybody,
mm,
big players, going to be on there. We're going to see Aave on there soon as well, I imagine. All those kind of big players in the DeFi space will move on there because that's just the cycle that it goes. If a layer two has enough network effect or has enough marketing effect, like this one certainly has, the big players move
mm.
in, and we see the smaller players obviously will always just disappear under the strength of the bigger players.
Yep. By centralization, I mean, yes, it's completely decentralized, but I mean that I really hope that they don't end up winning and cornering the entire market. I really hope that Optimism and ZkSync and all of these other layer twos will survive so that we actually have sort of like a choice of, uh, I suppose, actors who are always competing against each other. I'd be worried if I suppose everybody were to move to base and then other layer twos were to dry up. So I, I know in some sense we always do ask, do we need another layer two? This one is fast and it does the job. But at the same time, I really would want to see a sort of thriving ecosystem, or at least a certain number of layer twos that keep each other sort of in balance. Meaning that if Base knows that Optimism is out there after it, and ZK-Sync and all of these are layer twos, Base will not decide to charge excessive fees or anything like that. So even in this Web3 space, I hope we don't end up seeing a monopoly, and I hope Ethereum is always competing against Solana, competing and cooperating. So it's really nice seeing this decentralized space, and I'm hoping that it remains decentralized and spread out enough in the sense that there are several options for us to choose from as developers and as users.
Well, I think the answer is the market will decide what we
Mm,
need. Right now, we have way more infrastructure than we could probably need. There's so much fast, cheap block space out there with all these layer
mm.
twos. Whereas the last bull market, we didn't have enough of that. Layer twos were kind of only really starting to come online at the peak of the last bull market. So what we see now is that we have huge amounts of cheap options for blockchain but no one
Mm,
has built product enough products on there. So where are the projects?
indeed.
Where are they building? The infrastructure is there. Base is another infrastructure set that's there. Currently, all we're seeing on Base is Me Too products, Uniswap, a Me Too product
Yeah.
moving onto there. But where is the unique products that blockchain can deliver to the world? That's what we're waiting to see still.
It also raises an additional layer of complexity in that if a developer wanted to build now, you're right, they have a whole bunch of other choices. Now, the developer has to kind of try and think, well, if I put it on a base, will it be around 2 years down the line? If I put it on Optimism, will it be around? That becomes another challenge because if one of these platforms stop becoming competitive, then it's actually a risk to the products that are on top of it. But I guess that's, as you said, the market eventually will decide.
Yeah, and that's what the network effects kind of cause. And we're kind of seeing that now. A lot of the layer ones that came around in 2020, 2021, they're all starting to die off. You know, Phantom's been massively affected by the bridge hack. And I kind of probably consider that to be a dead chain now. So I think what we're
Mm,
seeing is that the market has decided we didn't want that many layer ones and we don't have them. They're dying off.
mm,
And
mm,
this market cycle, we're going to see layer twos die off, at least the major ones. But there's always going to be these spin offs. You know, there's obviously the smaller layer twos that people can create for unique projects, which I think will constantly and always exist. And that's what, you
mm,
know, the
mm.
optimistic stack is all about. And Arbitrum's orbit, you know, it's basically copying their blockchain. So I think there's going to be lots of those little ones around for unique projects, unique styles. But how many of the, I guess, the real layer twos rather than those layer kind of threes are actually going to survive? Don't know.
It's mind blowing that the number of protocols out there that are on Web3 competing, it's really big. Whole bunch of different protocols with different use cases. Some of them are really similar with just slightly different branding, but it kind of resembles the protocol competition when the internet was coming out. Right now, when we use the internet, we don't even think about the protocol we're using. When you type HTTP, we're using the hypertext transfer protocol. When you're downloading something, it's in the file transfer protocol. And there's so many on the internet, and they're all layered. But then eventually, like you said, the market will decide. The market did decide for the internet, and so the protocols that didn't end up winning, we don't even know that they existed. But now in the Web3 space, it's almost like it's orders of magnitude bigger in terms of the options that are just coming out there. It's like there's so much more money hitting Web3, I think, than hit Web2. And now the innovation is insane. I think it'll be really interesting to see how this pans out. Will we end up with several protocols that do the same thing or just one protocol? It's going to be really interesting to watch.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to our next topic, what we've got here, which is Mantle is moving from Optimism to ZkSync. So why are they doing that, Will?
Hmm. ZkSync is an improvement over layer twos because previously we only had two options of layer twos. We had optimistic rollups, and zero knowledge rollups. Now, the good thing with optimistic rollups is that you can do all kinds of cool and crazy things up there. You can run smart contracts. It's quite literally like an Ethereum layer two on Optimism. The only disadvantage is that when you want to bring your tokens back down into Ethereum, you've got to wait a long time, sometimes hours. Now,
Days, like
no,
7 days on Arbitrum, isn't it?
it's maddening. But then the cool thing is you can run smart contracts. Now, then you do have ZK rollups, zero knowledge rollups. The transfer is super quick from layer two to layer one. The problem is that on layer two, you can't do anything there except just transfer tokens. So you've always had to choose, do I want long withdrawal times and all these features, or do I want fast withdrawal times and no features? Now, ZkSync is the first of a very few that lets you have your cake and eat it. It's zero knowledge withdrawals, very, very fast, but at the same time, you can have your own small Ethereum layer 2 up there and do all kinds of crazy things. And on top of that, you can also have layer threes on top of that. So they've really built something super innovative. Now, Mantle has been looking at this and they've been thinking, oh my God, we've already started on Optimism and we've been building, but this thing looks really cool. Should we move to it? And they've put this out to a vote, and the options are: should we keep building what we're building and have our own blockchain, or do we just hop onto ZkSync and spin up a layer two like that, or even a layer three? And this is up to the community. Uh, it'll be really interesting to see where they vote. I personally hope they go to the ZkSync. What about you, Simon?
It's interesting just to see that the community gets to make these kind of moves, and
Mm,
the question for any product trying to do this is, I guess, how long they've been in an environment for, because the bigger they get, the harder it is to make that kind of move. So if they're going to
mm.
do it now, probably now is the time, because you would think in another year, 2 years, it's probably too late. They've kind of built out too much of a network in that one space. So I'm all for it. I like ZK I think it's going to be a better technology in general. As you said, it just removes so many barriers. It allows movements between blockchains, layer ones, layer twos, so much more seamless, which I think is what we need. We need to have projects that can build and move between these things without anybody really knowing or caring. And so ZK Syncs give that opportunity. So if Mantle want to move there and they can see the opportunities there, sure, let's do it, make it happen.
And and I think they had originally chosen Optimism specifically because they figured they could bring a big ecosystem of apps working there. But now they've thought, wow, we can still have a big ecosystem, but then also fast withdrawal times. I think that's the thing that's really interesting them. And Mantle, you what was it? BitDAO, I think before. I think
It's a
that's what
bit,
they used to be called. And yeah, they've got
yeah.
a huge treasury. Yeah.
We've done a whole podcast on Mantle. So if anyone wants to check that out, go check back in the catalog there. You'll find Mantle in it, and we'll tell you all about what it does. Let's move on to something that people are still loving to talk about, which is Ripple. Obviously, Ripple had
Hmm.
huge amounts of talk in the space when it, I guess, defeated the SEC's ruling about it being security, kind of.
Yeah.
But now they're talking about faster payments. What's going on with them, Will?
Wow. They released a white paper this week. They called it a white paper, and it was in conjunction with a group called Faster Payments. It's kind of like an industry conglomerate or group of payment providers, and it was essentially a study of where the market is heading and where it is and where it's heading and how blockchain could solve this. I wouldn't call it exactly a white paper, maybe just uh, how they think the market will end up. For the Ripple fans, I guess it's nice to see that Ripple is engaging with these kinds of people. I think Ripple's challenge is that it does have a knack for creating partnerships and experiments with banks. This isn't the first time that Ripple have been involved with a fairly big player. So they do have a really good business development, I guess. But then the thing is, we haven't seen a product out there yet that's actually being used. Ripple has been speculative for years. We haven't really seen a use case, right? So I I would really like to see a use case with Ripple. I'm not sure where all these partnerships are taking Ripple, but I guess kudos to them. What do you think, Simon?
Yeah, Ripple's never been one of my strong knowledge points in the crypto space, just because the risk to reward from my investment hat has never really been there with it. So I've never dug deeply into it. Obviously, it always had the SEC challenge hanging over its head.
Mm,
With that
mm,
cleared, obviously now people are going to start being more excited about Ripple. So maybe the risk to reward is starting to be a bit more tempting in that space. But if they're trying to do things and trying to make things move forward for them, all the better for the space. I still see it
mm.
as being a very centralized
Yeah.
blockchain. I still see it as being very much so owned by a very few. So for me, I still probably
Mm.
pass on any major news on Ripple. It's not really in my investment sphere.
I feel like Ripple may at one time have almost had a technological advantage. And I actually do mean almost, in that by the time it came out, everyone would be asking, well, why should I not use Ethereum for this new thing that Ripple is proposing? Maybe when it came out, it might have been faster than Ethereum. So you could call that an advantage. But the point is that now there's so many tokens that are just as fast or faster than Ripple. The only thing that Ripple may have under its belt is maybe marketing and business development. It does come to
Mm.
that in the end. It's not always the best protocol that wins. So if they ever do manage to get into a bank or a payment system or to work with PayPal, good on them. But so far, we haven't seen anything come out of the partnerships yet. But it's
Absolutely.
yeah.
It's Ripple doing Ripple things. Moving on to price action, mate. Bitcoin's still sitting under 30K. Ethereum's still sitting under $1,900. They're really doing nothing at the moment, the big players. Obviously, there's plenty of projects out there that are really going well. We've got our podcast about Rollbit, which has done extremely well in the last month. So Bitcoin and Ethereum aren't showing signs of much life at the moment. They're very much going sideways, but there are plenty of projects coming up with cool ideas which are popping. So again, it's another sign to me that, bear market's behind when projects are delivering, building, and price on those small projects is really responding massively. So yeah, things like Rollbit, things like Unibot, they're all done really, really well of late. So that doesn't happen in a bear market. Everything keeps going down, but things are moving. Ethereum and Bitcoin are not yet. My theory on that is that we won't see much movement until probably the expected Bitcoin ETF in the US. I think that's going to be a big catalyst. It's going to be a big news item. It's still not going to bring retail in, but it's going to be a trigger for traders and people in the space to say, okay, it's move time, and the price I think will move. And I think that's when we'll probably see this range bound change. And that ETF could be, I think it's in the next month is the first potential time, or it could be in the next 6 months. But most people are expecting these Bitcoin ETFs to go through. And I think that's going to be the trigger for the large market cap to start moving up. And I think that'll be the trigger for everyone to say, okay, I think maybe, yes, the bears might finally, be quiet at that point once that triggers that big push up. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm just wondering. I mean, I agree in that it's mostly been sideways market, and it's really strange to hear some people still calling it a bear. It to me as well. It's starting to really feel like a bull. There's a whole bunch of good news, and the market is reacting to good news. But then I've got a question for you, Simon. In that, how what do you think the reasons are for people to expect a positive result for the ETFs this time round?
The main reason being, I guess, the bigger players have come into the space. So the BlackRocks have given some element of certainty that the market does want this. And it's them actually combining up with Coinbase itself, a regulated company as being the custodians. So it allows traceability, and Coinbase's, I guess, trust in the space as being the custodians of that Bitcoin. That I think was kind of the last piece of the puzzle that these guys managed to solve. So I think that's a reason why a lot of people think it. And I think there's just market demand. Every other country in the world, or major country in the world, kind of has these now. So there's a huge demand that the US actually finally get on board with this. So that's kind of why a lot of people are thinking it. The big players are really in the space. The big players are really saying we want this. And so I think that the regulator has to respond and say, okay, this is what the market requires. So we will figure out a way how to regulate it. And I think they're pretty much there.
It was also good to see the SEC get pushback from, well, obviously Ripple, but then Coinbase as well. I think the SEC had uh, put a couple of restrictions on Coinbase, and the judge threw that out of the court, and they said that's ridiculous. And so it's nice to see that there's been a bit of pushback, and there was also the law. I think we covered it last week or the week before that. It wasn't a law, but it was a bill requiring the SEC and another financial group to come together and actually create legal clarity as to what is a security, what is a currency. I suppose that's all around good news, and yeah, it could really play into the next bull.
So as far as
Uh,
price action is concerned, yeah, I think the Bitcoin ETF is going to be a big news item, and it's not going to be a buy the rumor, sell the news kind of thing. I think it's actually going, once the news drops that it's available, it will be a boost for price, and I think we will see Bitcoin move towards that 40K mark. And then that's starting to run in towards the halving next year, and that's kind of running into the whole macro environment in general starting to change, where we will probably see the pressures that central banks around the world put on economies in general, they potentially will start loosening. So it's just starting to all kind of align together. Yeah, I think think that we're going to see some price movements in the next 6 months to a year to the positive. I just can't see the bears coming back into the place anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely something to look forward to. And all the research we've been putting into this show, and everybody who's been watching the show, hopefully you've been doing your research, and the whole purpose has been to really set ourselves up for this bull, so when the bull comes, we also start setting ourselves up for the next bear. And it's always about being early and taking profits when we can.
Absolutely. So let's leave it there. So if you've made it this far, please give us likes, give us comments, give us subscriptions to the service so we can get our work out there more, so we can build this network and hopefully educate more people in the space. Thanks for joining us, Will.
Thanks, Simon. See you next time.